Welcome to another episode of See You at the Top with Tony Mont. In today's video, I'm going to break down a deal we locked up in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm going to show you how I analyze the property as a wholesale deal. What is a wholesale deal? It's having a purchase agreement signed by a seller that is assignable and using an assignment contract to assign your rights to the purchase agreement over to an investor at a higher price. And that's where you make your profit or your assignment fee. And ultimately why I decided to flip this property myself instead. You're going to learn what to do and what not to do as a real estate investor. You can learn from my mistakes and learn from my experience to help you in your real estate investment journey. As always, make sure you like and subscribe and tell a friend about this channel. If you need additional help with wholesaling real estate, I've put a link to my free See You at the Top course in the description below. Stay tuned for the next video where I tell you exactly how much I made in profit on this deal after I flipped it. But first, let's get into the nitty-gritty of virtual wholesaling real estate. This was all done over the phone. I didn't walk this property. I talked to the seller over the phone. I talked to the buyers over the phone. This is done 100% virtual. Virtual wholesaling can help you scale your business. It's a lot more efficient. You don't have to be in your backyard to wholesale real estate or invest in real estate. It can all be done over the phone. The most important skill you need to get really good at as an investor is running comps and knowing the value of your property in its current condition, and also knowing the ARV or after repair value of your property after you make the necessary repairs and upgrades. If these numbers are not accurate in the beginning, then the deal won't make sense for your investors that you're trying to wholesale the deal to, and it's not going to make sense for you if you decide to flip the property yourself. We had most of our numbers correct from the beginning of our conversation with the seller, but we were off by one important number, which I'll go over later. Ultimately, that could have killed the deal for us. Lucky for me, I have a very necessary skill I've learned over the years of negotiating a price reduction with the seller using my price reduction script. If you struggle with price reductions in real estate, make sure you check out my scripts page in the description. Now let's go over the details of the deal. So after looking at the comps in the area, the comparables in the area, we came up with a $425,000 ARV. ARV is after repair value. You're going to rehab this property to sell for the most money on the MLS. When you're running comps or comparables in an area, you want to stay very close to that house. Typically, we like to stay within a half mile. We don't like to cross any major highways or railroad tracks. And we also like to stay within 6 months because the market shifts so much. We want to stay 6 months back of what has sold and what is currently on the market. See what went pending fast, what got rehabbed and went pending quickly, how many properties are for sale, how many are pending in that area. All that helps you come up with your numbers. You're also going to want a very similar property. Similar square footage, similar bed and bath count, style of home, lot size, year build, basement, foundation type. All those go into what your ARV can ultimately be. It's like finding a needle in a haystack sometimes. It's really hard in certain areas, especially mountain towns and rural areas, to find a property just like yours that was repaired and sold at a much higher price on the MLS. It's usually a lot easier to find ARVs in cookie cutter neighborhoods, more condensed areas, and it's also a lot easier to find as is or current market value of properties than it is ARV, because most properties sold on the MLS that you can see are sold as is or in just regular current condition. They weren't rehabbed. So finding ARV can be tricky in these mountain towns, but you can get really good at it if you know what to look for. Since there isn't a lot of similar homes in this area, we do have to go further out than a half a mile. Sometimes we go a mile, 2 miles out. And sometimes we do have to go further back than 6 months on the MLS. Sometimes we go a year back and see if there's a similar property that was flipped and what ours ultimately could be worth once we flip it. Now, this property is in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a great market for investors. Asheville's a little mountain town. It's growing every day. There's tons of investors and tons of opportunities if you know the market well. One downside to a smaller market, especially mountain towns, is finding a good, reliable contractor can be tough. And this ultimately being my first flip I've ever done in Asheville, I didn't have a good relationship with a contractor or a realtor in the area, which came back to bite me in the ass. It could have cost, and it did cost me about $10,000. Now, what interested me in this home was its location and its lot size. It's only about 15 minutes from downtown, sits on over 1.6 acres. It's a 4-bed, 2-bath. It was built in 1965, and this lead came into my CRM from a Google ad, or PPC, meaning pay per click. This means the seller was super motivated to sell. She went on our website, she filled out a form to see if she could get a cash offer on her home. It wasn't a cold call lead. She recently got a job in Vermont. She had to move in about 30 days. The home would not qualify for traditional lending because of a shower leak that rotted out her flooring. And as it sat, there was a 4-foot wide open hole in her bathroom floor. She didn't have time or money to fix the issue before she started her new job, so she decided to reach out to us and see if she could sell it fast for cash. Selling fast for cash meant that it could be sold as is with no contingencies or appraisals. Now back to the numbers on the deal. The records showed that she paid $240,000 for the property 10 years ago. By looking at the comparables in the area, we thought the property was probably worth around $290,000 as it sat and as is conditioned to an investor. The seller wanted $320,000 for the home, but after negotiations, we landed at $272,000 and she signed the contract. What we still didn't realize, she really paid $95,000 for the property 10 years ago, and the records were showing a much bigger land deal that was split up. She bought her property for $95,000 and the other was sold for $145,000, making the total $240,000. So make sure you're really digging into the numbers while you're running comps. Look at public records, look at Zillow, look at Propstream, and ask these questions as you see them. We sent this out as a wholesale deal to our investors in the area at $290,000. So that means we were going to make $18,000 on this property by assigning our purchase agreement to a cash buyer. We had a ton of interest on the property, but we had very limited access. We could only get 2 real walkthroughs because the family was still living in there, it was occupied, and they weren't comfortable giving our buyers access. If there wasn't so much water damage to the floor and wood rot, access would not have been a huge issue, but there was much more work than we originally thought, with multiple floor joists being completely rotted out. So after this seller decided that she didn't want more walkthroughs, we had to switch our strategy. With the right amount of time and access, after we knew the real condition of the property and the repairs needed, I thought we could probably assign this to a buyer for $240,000 because our rehab budget did go up after the 2 walkthroughs that we had. And how did we know the rehab went up? We asked the questions of our buyers that went out there. 2 buyers walked it, and they showed us exactly what was going on with this property. It was a lot more than the seller originally told us. And that is one downfall on virtually wholesaling. You don't really see the property until after you get it under contract. You're going at what the seller is telling you. Now, she told us her husband was a contractor, he's done all this work to the property, but in reality, turns out the guy was a drunk and he didn't do good work. So what we thought was a $30,000 rehab ended up being much more. But I'm gonna go over the numbers and the formula on how we locked up this deal, just of what the seller told us and what we thought the rehab was and what we thought we were going to make on it as a wholesale deal. Remember, the ARV after repair value, we decided was $425,000 on this property. We thought the rehab was around $30,000. So you take your ARV, if this is a fix and flip formula, which is $425,000, and we times it by 0.75. Now, what does that 0.75 mean? This is going to change in each of your markets too. 0.75 is the percentage of what cash buyers are paying in your market of the ARV. So if cash buyers are paying 75% of ARV minus repairs, we know they're looking for about a 25% gross profit margin. So we take 425 times 0.75, that takes out the 25% gross profit for our investors. We took out the rehab, so that's a true gross profit to our investors, and we landed at $288,750. We rounded up a little bit and sent it out at $290. So that $290 would be our sell at. And we locked this one up for $272, meaning our assignment fee on this deal should have been about $18,000. Now, one real quick thing I want to go over is that 25% gross profit margin for your investors. Now, it's a gross profit, meaning there is going to be some cost taken out of that 25%. And in today's market, that's around 15% of soft cost that's going to be taken out, because most of our fix and flip investors are going to use hard money loans. Hard money loans are typically much higher interest than a traditional lender, and you also have to pay points on the front end, usually 1 to 2% of what you're borrowing. So the cost of money has risen quite a bit with the interest rates along in real estate. So out of that 15% of soft cost, it's going to be 6% in commissions on the exit, meaning once a flipper does flip this property, they have to sell it on the MLS. They're going to have to pay a listing agent, and they're going to have to pay a buyer's agent bringing a buyer to the table. So typically that's around 5 or 6%. And then closing cost. Remember, your buyer pays both sides of closing cost on the assignment contract and at least one side when they sell it on the MLS after the flip. So that takes 4% out. And then about 5% for hard money. There's going to be those origination fees I talked about, high interest rates right now, over 10%. I know some interest rates on hard money can be 15, 18% right now because of where the market is. So the 25% of gross profit in this deal at the 425 was $118,750, but the soft cost coming out of that was $63,750. So that would mean our investor, if all these numbers worked out right, would make $55,000 on this deal, which is about 10%, which is actually really good. It's a good return on your money. So that's the breakdown of the 25% that we took out there for our investor, and then how we were going to make our $18,000. Remember, your assignment fee, that's going to be negotiated with your seller on how low you can get that offer. Sometimes assignment fees are 18 grand, sometimes they're 118 grand. It all depends. It just ends up with your motivation and your negotiation with your seller, how low you can get that property. Now, I went from marketing to cash buyers to renegotiating with the seller on the price so I could buy the property and flip it myself on this deal. Here's what I discovered, that the seller only paid 95 grand and not the 240 we thought for this home. As I was going over the numbers with her, I asked, did you really pay 240 grand cash for this house? Because that seems really high where the market was in 2013. And she explained to me she only paid 95 grand, and then I knew I could get a price reduction. The property needed a ton more work than we originally thought, and we were no longer granted access. We had to close a lot faster now. We were running out of time, and the seller needed to move fast. It was the perfect storm. So when renegotiating, remember to empathize and solve your client's problems. I knew a lower offer is still a good offer for her, knowing she only paid 95 grand. I also did some research and knew that the city of Asheville would never allow this property to be permitted for a short-term rental. And that was actually one thing she said to me as I was renegotiating. Well, why don't you just turn this into an Airbnb? Well, Asheville won't let you turn it into an Airbnb. They rarely give out those permits. They're really strict with short-term rentals in Asheville and certain mountain towns. I also found some other comps that justified my lower offer. And this property would never make sense as a buy and hold because of its price point and current interest rates. If you tried to buy this and burr it or refinance it, then the interest rates are too high and you wouldn't cash flow on the property. I didn't have time, I didn't have access to get a proper inspection or a repair estimate, so there was a lot of risk on me basically buying this property sight unseen. And to this day, I have never stepped foot in this property. The comps were not cut and dry. This is not an area with similar properties. Everything looks different, different year builds, different size lots. I thought it was worth somewhere between $375 and $425 after I repaired it. And after 3 days of negotiation and research, I was able to get a reduction of $52,000. And now I had a new contract to purchase the house at $220,000. I knew at this price, at the very least, I could close on it, sell it as is to an investor for $240. But I'll break down the numbers on the flip in my next video. I decided to flip it myself. If I know one thing about real estate investing, it's that it doesn't always go as planned. Make sure you check out my next video to see how this went from a possible $18,000 profit to a much more profitable deal for me. And I'll see you guys in the next video. What's up, guys? Thanks for watching my video. If you'd like to watch more videos, my playlist is right here. And if you'd like to subscribe, click down here. I'll see you guys at the top.